Portable devices are well established in our daily life and taken as something common and absolutely casual. But how was it in the past? Did Clive sincLAIR contribute to the development of portable devices, or he had nothing but the toys like the ZX Spectrum and Failure QL? To find that out, we have to move for a while to the old good 80s.
Какое-то время переместиться в старые добрые 80-е.
Империя сэра Клайва. In the first half of the 80s, Sir Clive's empire, built on modern, tiny but affordable devices, was shaking European market, releasing such popular computers as ZX80, ZX81 and of course the machine which turned the market upside down, the ZX Spectrum.
Рынок ZX Spectrum.
In his projects, Sir Clive always tended to minimalism and portability. Minimal sizes along with the low prices were sincLAIR's main priorities.
Являлись главными приоритетами sincLAIR. Поэтому
it was pretty natural that from the beginning of the 80s in sincLAIR research there were plans developed about creating a full-fledged, business-oriented portable computer that would occupy a niche of affordable, comfortable, but at the same time serious enough machines.
Удобных и в то же время достаточно серьезных машин.
The project was named ZX83, that it was renamed to ZX84 and finally got a high-sounding name Pandora. But sincLAIR couldn't make cheap and functional enough portable computer in the first half of the 80s. Therefore, eventually the project of a portable computer leads to the sincLAIR Quantum Leap or sincLAIR QL, which had been planned as a portable but was released in 1984 as a desktop computer and not a small one, at least comparing to the other Sir Clive's computers.
Комп, к тому же комп не маленьких таких размеров, во всяком случае относительно других компьютеров сэра Клайва.
По причине Because of the awful rush, QL had lots of bugs and serious issues. Along with other sincLAIR's project, it became one of those torpedoes that eventually sank the British developer and let his empire self-destruct.
И позволили его империи благополучно самоуничтожиться.
But nevertheless, QL played an essential and epic role in the history. However, there is already a video about QL and its role in the history. I will leave a link to it in the description below. After the failure of QL in 1986, Sir Clive had to sell his computer business to Alan Sugar and his Amstrad company, which had successfully produced Spectrums up to 1992, and Sir Clive has gone from the computer market forever. At least, many think so.
Многие так считают.
But that was a little different, or rather absolutely not like that. The newly minted Restless Knight didn't give up, continued thinking about the portable computer, and in 1987, based on the Pandora project developments, it was released.
sincLAIR таки увидел свет.
As Uncle Clive already didn't own the brand name sincLAIR for producing his new brainchild, Cambridge Computer Company was registered, which under Sir Clive leadership completed the Pandora project.
Проект Pandora.
In September of '87, sincLAIR's portable computer appeared on the Which Computer show, and in '88 it went on sale named Z88 at a rather democratic price, £230. Z88 was distributed in this flimsy, at least seemingly cardboard packaging, which I don't have, but I think it's not a big deal and Google Photos provide us an accurate enough picture of it.
Нам достаточное о ней представление.
Inside there is a really solid and stylish box that is not just factory packaging, but also works as a case for daily usage. I have no idea how long it can last, but nevertheless.
Сколько ее хватит, но тем не менее.
There are two compartments in the box. There is a rather voluminous manual of stylish grey color and familiar form factor inside one of them. And in the second compartment there is our guest of honor by courtesy of collector Alexander Blednov. Thanks a lot for that.
Александром Бледновым, за что ему огромнейшее, конечно же, спасибо. И
here it is, sincLAIR's portable computer, the dream of the noble knight. Let's talk about look, cause it is said first impressions last forever. What can one say about the keyboard? I will say that short, it's divine. I'm saying that without any irony. At least it's absolutely for sure the best retro keyboard I've ever kept in my hands. It looks like a rubber one, like on the very first Spectrums, but it's made differently, mixing technologies of membrane and rubber keyboards. It is very smooth, responsive and tactile pleasant keyboard of 46 keys. There is nothing unusual by functionality here, and there are no such piles of functional keys as it was on the Spectrum. Here we have such substandard keys as rhombus and square, which serve as additional shifts or something. I don't know how to say that more appropriately.
Не знаю, как это сказать более правильно. В общем,
combinations of rhombus and square give access to alternative functions and serve as hotkeys for shortcuts.
Киями для быстрого вызова приложений и так далее.
Also, there are three unfamiliar keys below. They are Help, by pressing it we get various hints, Menu, which turns on different menus of applications, and finally the Index key, which, so to speak, back us to the desktop, that is to the main screen which we see when the computer starts.
При включении компьютера.
This beast turns on-off by simultaneous pressing of both shifts. The screen here is mega widescreen and its resolution is 440 by 46 pixels, i.e. 10:1, and it led to display 8 lines of text.
И позволяет отображать 8 строк текста.
Official software for this computer developed precisely the way to be convenient to work with despite a small quantity of information that fits on the screen. Below the screen there are descriptions of hotkeys and pre-installed office applications.
Для предустановленных офисных программ.
On the left we have a power input, a hidden reset button to be pressed with a pin, and a wheel to adjust contrast.
Регулировать контрастность.
On the opposite side there is only one port. This port serves to connect the device with another computer to copy data and software. There are tools for that here. Also, through this socket Z88 can go online. Don't ask me how, I have no idea. But it can be connected to the internet for sure. I don't see any other ports here. I can assume that the internet connects via the socket with the help of some additional hardware.
Что интернет подключается через этот порт при помощи каких-то дополнительных железяк.
There is nothing on the rear panel, but below here we have such a stand that opens and allows us to adjust the angle at which the computer will stand. This is very convenient considering the type of screen used. By the way, there is Made in Scotland sticker here, and this is probably the very first inscription I saw in my life which says Made in Scotland. Cool.
Круто.
Next comes a battery compartment. The computer can work as on PSU as on 4 AA batteries. It is said in the manual that batteries can last for up to 20 hours of constant work. But this is a doubtful statement, cause battery's capacity can vary a lot, at least nowadays. We will run the computer on batteries, by the way, cause I don't have the PSU, but anyway. Below we can see the inscription that tells us who and where manufactured this computer, the beeper's hole, and a part of the memory compartment lid, which we will talk about a little later. Also on the side there is a hint to an alleged hole for something like an expansion slot, which is present on the board itself. Still, nevertheless, there is no hole for it on the hull. I don't know what this connector is for and how it is supposed to be accessed by the user. Should he open the computer or cut the hole by himself?
Наверное, как-то так как других вариантов у меня просто нет. Далее.
Now we will move to the front end face, where the memory module's compartment is situated, hidden under the transparent plastic lid.
Пластиковой крышкой.
This is not just a mere lid, and if it's open, the computer won't start. Also, reset button function depends on its state. While the lid is open, a double press on the reset button will cause a hard reset, and when it's closed, a soft reset.
А при закрытой легкий, то бишь soft reset.
In its basic configuration, Z88 has 32 kilobytes of RAM and 128 kilobytes of ROM, where the operating system named OS and all sorts of default applications are stored. Here we have 3 slots for additional RAM and ROM modules to be installed. As you see, here we have an extra 128 kilobytes of RAM and 2 EPROMs. Those are 2 ROM modules. One is 32 kilobyte EPROM that could be erased with the ultraviolet light, and the second is a flash memory of 1 megabyte, where in our case the games are stored.
Мегабайт, на котором в нашем случае хранятся игры.
And as we already started to talk about memory, we will continue the technical description and go over the insights briefly. As with the ZX Spectrum, the king here is Z80 at the frequency of 3.2 MHz. Not exactly the same Z80 as in other computers, but a less energy-consuming version of it. The memory here is divided into pages of 16 kilobytes each. The processor's address space is divided into 4 windows, each having one of the memory pages on it. But let's turn this machine on and look how it works.
Как это все работает.
This is our main screen, or if you prefer, the desktop. On the left side, all the pre-installed apps and everything that we will install here is situated.
Сюда инсталлить.
Z88 is purposed mainly for business usage, and the main office app here is called Pipe Dream. And you know, despite this computer is already more than 30 years old, Pipe Dream doesn't feel like a toy.
Не ощущается какой-то прям игрушкой.
This is a rather functional office app with the possibility of searching by keywords, automatic error correction, and an impressive enough set of tools. Functionally, it's approximately the same as Acorn View Professional. Well, far from just a toy.
Далеко не просто игрушка.
Basic, of course, also present here. The role of the beloved by everyone Basic here is played by Acorn's BBC Basic from 1981.
1981 года.
Also here we have all sorts of calendars, alarms, calculators, clocks, diaries, and other necessary stuff for a businessman from the 80s. By the way, if you set today's date, the computer will determine today's day of the week absolutely correctly. Cool. The diary here is also very impressive and allows to find entries by the keywords and date. What else can I say about the pre-installed software? Of course, there is a set of tools for file operations, managing apps, utilities to connect printers, and transferring data to PC or Mac, disassembler. And of course, there are tools to connect this computer to the internet. There is probably everything provided and considered within 1988, except for the games, of course.
Наверное, все. Кроме, разумеется, игр.
Sir Clive was true to form, and at the end of the 80s, he still didn't love games as he didn't love them in the beginning of the decade. Therefore, Z88 still wasn't oriented for games as the Spectrum. Though no, even worse. As the Spectrum was a desktop computer and more or less diverse usage was supposed, then a new Uncle Clive's computer was designed for professional use only. Probably it never entered developers' minds that someone would play games on it peering to this narrow monochrome screen. But nevertheless, there were handymen found, of course, which ported some ZX Spectrum hits to this business monster.
Спектрумовских хитов на этого бизнес-монстра.
So, when this computer got into my hands, I knew there were some games on the Flash EPROM here. I was able to see them, but I didn't know how to run them. And only with the help of Nikolai Zaponov from the Drunk Flight team, after a few hours of unsuccessful attempts, we managed to launch a game on this beast after all. Everything is so complicated here that I would never do that alone, and now I'll tell you in detail how to run games on this computer. I don't know for sure, but probably there are other easier ways of running the third-party software here. But at least on this version of the operating system installed on this computer, we couldn't launch game in another way. So now I will explain and show you how to run games on the Z88 and the third version of the OS operating system.
Версии операционной системы OS.
At first we turn the computer off. open the additional memory modules compartment lid and press the reset button twice. That is a hard reset, and this operation must be fulfilled whenever we want to install a new game. Otherwise, in our case, the computer will show us a message that there isn't enough memory. I don't know why it is so, as 128 kilobytes RAM card presence here, and the games take much less space.
Игры занимают гораздо меньше. Ну да ладно.
Well, anyway, let's follow the path we found. Instead of hard reset, probably we can take batteries out for some time, as the games are installed into the energy-dependent RAM memory, and when there is no power, the computer back to its virgin state. However, there is a capacitor inside which holds data in the memory during battery replacement. Well, having returned the computer to its factory settings one or another way, we go to the Flash EPROM, where the games are stored.
Входим на Flash EPROM, где у нас лежат игры.
Every game consists of a little app file and 1 or 2 blocks of 16 kilobytes each. So, we go to the Flash store, press C key, look at how many blocks the game contains and remember the exact names of all its blocks.
Название всех ее блоков.
In our case, this is the game with the abbreviated name JSW and consisting of 2 blocks. After that, we switch to installer, press reserve to reserve the number of blocks we need, 1 or 2. App file should not be counted. In my case, for some reason the computer doesn't allow me to reserve more than 2 blocks for installing apps. But more isn't needed anyway. By the way, if you reserve 2 blocks, but an app has only 1 block, the game won't run. Please don't ask me why it is so. I got this experience through the hours of S-Pain and I have no ideas of the reasons for that. After we reserved a required number of blocks, we return to Flash Store, press F, type the name of one of the game's files and load it into our RAM device. In a newly appeared line, we have to add a colon and write RAM.1 in capital letters before the block's name.
В появившейся строке перед названием файла нужно добавить двоеточие и большими буквами RAM.1.
If you did everything right, the inscription completed should appear. Then do the same thing with the rest of the game's files. When all is done, go to Filer, press Select Device and type RAM.1 instead of RAM.0. All copied files will appear in the window immediately. Select APP file, attention, exactly APP and not any other. Otherwise, everything will freeze and you will have to do a hard reset again. So, select APP file, press Enter to have a pointer at it and press simultaneously square plus Z plus I. Don't worry if you weren't succeeding in pushing that code and thrown to some other window. When you press everything correct, the installation will begin and after it's finished, the game will appear in the list of applications. Yes, this is tough, but it feels like an actual Spectrum experience and I felt an absolute pleasure when after all those actions the game finally started.
Это все, конечно, жесть, но тем не менее, в этом есть какой-то элемент спектрумирования, и я прям ощутил массу положительных эмоций, когда после всех этих манипуляций игра таки запустилась.
Jet Set Willy is quite playable here, of course, if Jet Set Willy can be called a playable game in principle.
Это та же самая...
It's the same game as on the Spectrum, just monochrome and on a tiny screen. To keep the aspect ratio, only one part of the game screen is visible. By the way, we can press Tab here to zoom the picture out and get a broader view.
Получить уменьшенное изображение, чтобы иметь больший обзор. Но, как по мне, это...
But as for me, that's less playable, but with a standard image, everything is quite comfortable. Of course, with consideration of how it could be comfortable on a small monochrome screen without backlight. But let's look at something else. Doing the same actions and run Tetris. That is a usual Tetris, but horizontal, and when the figures move horizontally from right to left, completely disorienting you. Screw that.
Просто угар, так как когда фигуры перемещаются по горизонтали справа налево, это напрочь дезориентирует. Ну его в пень.
Also, there is a port of one of the early Spectrum games called Sir Lancelot. That is how it looks like. Well, and Manic Miner is also present here.
Имеется, куда ж без него. И в принципе
It's pretty playable, of course, if you can play such games in general.
подобные игры. Устанавливая,
Installing chess, and there is nothing to tell about, ordinary chess. But Bounder looks curious. Well, it looks usual, but the fact we can see something like 3D on such a device is so cool.
типа 3D, это воспринимается прикольно. Еще пару игр я не смог.
I couldn't run a couple of games as they demanded additional levels to be loaded, which I didn't know where to find and how to load them. One of those games is What's Now from Gary Lancaster. Gary Lancaster is from the next team, and his name always can be seen in the next operating system, but that's not the point. Basically, everything is clear. The games work well, but the real question is there any sense to play games on such a device at all? But as experiment, yes, this is interesting. Pay attention to that utility Flash Store, which provides us access to the Flash module and with which we run games. It was developed in the late 90s, and that is not an accident, but paradoxically, precisely in the late 90s, Z88 got its peak popularity and lot of diverse software were made for it those years.
Немало разнообразного софта. Да, спустя...
Yes, 10 years after release, the computer becomes popular. Relatively popular, of course, but anyway.
Действительную, конечно, но все же. Кстати,
By the way, it would be wrong to say that the laptop, yes, that's how it was called. It would be wrong to say that the laptop project from Clive sincLAIR failed.
проект лэптопа от Клайва sincLAIR провалился.
Z88 wasn't a disaster in opposed to the sincLAIR QL, and the project was paid off. We can't also say that it was a great success. Nevertheless, the cost of development was paid off. The computer even brought Clive sincLAIR some profit, although its sales could not be compared to the ZX Spectrum or ZX81.
Spectrum или ZX81. Ну а почему же...
But why did in the late 90s this computer got a second life, received new software and fan base? I don't know. Like some other Sir Clive projects, it was probably ahead of its time, or presumably that was just due to the nostalgia. But it took its place as an exciting part of the history among the British Knights' inventions, and that place is far from the last.
Но вот как любопытная частица истории, он, конечно же, занял свое место среди разработок британского рыцаря. И причем место далеко не самое последнее. Друзья, видео на канале sincLAIR появляется только благодаря вам. В первую очередь, конечно же, тем, кто поддерживает канал на Патреоне, а также на стримах и любыми другими способами. И сегодня я хочу выразить особую благодарность сайту ZXArt, где есть вообще все для спектрума, Александру Бледнову, Сергею Цхавребашвили, Петровскому Андрею, Кейси Косовичу, Анатолию Мережаному, Маше и Сергею, Александру Ляшуку, Андрею Угольнику, Алексею Ярышко, компании Таон Electronics, Алексею Хэшу, тете Дупе, Василию Селиванову, Дмитрию Кахно, Лапу Лену, Пьяной Мухе, Владимиру Лиходеду, Осадчему Вадиму, Шишоиду, Файрфлексу, Спеки Фану, Роману Федяшеву, Аркуше, Роману Зайцеву и вообще всем тем, кто поддерживает канал и позволяет мне снимать новые видео. Спасибо вам, друзья!